Dubai is renowned for its glittering skyscrapers under the sun and bustling streets filled with luxury vehicles. Yet just a short distance from the city center, the land transforms into an endless desert where the winds and sand reign supreme, capable of swallowing everything with the force of nature. Adrian Cole, the young CEO of the tech conglomerate Coltech, had no idea that this trip would become the turning point of his life. Adrian sat in the armored off-road vehicle, his sharp eyes scanning the view through the window. The sky gradually turned a shade of amber, a sign of impending weather change. "A sandstorm is coming," the local driver said nervously. Adrian, dressed in a flawless suit, merely frowned. His meticulously planned schedule for an important meeting left no room for unexpected interruptions like a sandstorm. "So what if the storm comes?" Adrian asked coldly. He disliked anything that could disrupt his plans. "We need to find shelter immediately. Out here, a sandstorm can make everything disappear within minutes." The vehicle sped up along the sandy path, but within moments the sky began to darken. Sand particles were whipped into the air, forming violent whirlwinds. In no time, everything outside the vehicle's window turned into a blurry golden haze. The wind howled and waves of sand pounded against the car, making everyone inside feel as though they were trapped by the fury of nature. "We're lost," the driver exclaimed, his voice trembling. Adrian didn't respond. He could sense the chaos, but his survival instincts quickly kicked in. "Stay calm. Find a way out of here." But the storm left them no chance. The vehicle became stuck in the sinking sands, and every effort to free it proved futile. Adrian gazed out the window, a rare feeling of helplessness washing over him. The sand seemed like an infinite curtain, obscuring any sign of life. "We need to leave this place," he decided, opening the car door despite the driver's protests. Adrian stepped out, the fierce wind nearly tearing at his expensive suit. Each step through the sand was a struggle, but Adrian was not one to give up easily. He gradually moved away from the car, searching for a glimmer of hope in this desolate land. And then, like a miracle, he saw a light, a faint, flickering beacon in the midst of the swirling sands. Adrian gritted his teeth and made his way toward it. A lone house in the desert came into view, faintly outlined in Adrian's sight. It was a modest structure, built of sand-colored bricks, seemingly weathered by time and wind. But at that moment, it symbolized life, the only thing that could save him from the raging storm. Adrian knocked firmly on the old wooden door, the urgency in his pounding matching the frantic beat of his heart. The door opened and Adrian held his breath. Standing before him was a young woman with deep, enigmatic eyes that seemed to hold the secrets of the desert itself. Zara al-Hayek, a name he would later come to know, was draped in a long crimson scarf, striking against the harsh environment around her. "May I take shelter here?" "I'm lost in the storm," Adrian said, his voice hoarse from the wind and sand. Zara studied him for a long moment, her gaze unreadable as if she were weighing her decision. Then, without a word, she gently opened the door wider. Inside the small house was a world entirely different from the barren wasteland outside. Handcrafted rugs adorned the floor, a small fireplace burned brightly in the corner, and the air was filled with the warm aroma of wood and spices. Adrian sat down, exhaling deeply as the warmth began to chase away the biting chill of the storm. "You should thank the storm," Zara spoke for the first time, her voice gentle yet commanding. "Without it, you wouldn't have found this place." Adrian looked up at her. "And I wouldn't have found someone as kind as you." Zara smiled faintly, but her eyes retained their distant, guarded look, like a veil hiding something deeper. "You should rest. The storm isn't over yet." Adrian remained still, observing the mysterious woman before him. Zara was unlike any woman he had ever met. Her calm demeanor and the quiet strength she exuded behind her graceful exterior intrigued him. She didn't ask who he was, where he came from, or why he was there, and that only piqued Adrian's curiosity even more. That night, in the small house amidst the desert, under the howling winds and the icy gusts of sand, two people from entirely different worlds crossed paths. A meeting that seemed accidental, but was laced with destiny. Adrian had no idea that the moment he stepped through that door, his life would change forever. And Zara, this enigmatic woman, would bring him not only survival, but also secrets he could never have imagined. Hello, Soul Stories family. I hope you're all doing well. May God bless you with love, joy, and peace. I pray your days shine bright, your burdens ease, and your dreams come true. How did our last story touch you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly value them. You're more than subscribers, you're family. Your presence means the world to me. Let's continue this journey together. Inside the small house in the heart of the desert, the fire in the hearth burned steadily, casting a warm glow that softly illuminated the quiet space. Adrian sat on a simple wooden chair, his sharp eyes scanning the room. There was nothing but the basics. An old wooden table, a small bookshelf holding a few worn books, and carefully woven, handcrafted rugs. Zara's house, though modest, exuded an air of elegance, a peculiar combination that piqued his curiosity about its owner. Zara stood near the hearth, preparing a cup of tea with practiced, gentle movements. Her calm demeanor unsettled Adrian slightly. He was used to being met with admiration or deference from others, yet here he was, being ignored so nonchalantly. His pride flared. "Do you live here alone?" Adrian asked, his voice deep and authoritative. Zara turned to face him, her eyes meeting his directly. There was no fear or hesitation, only a frank gaze that seemed to weigh each word he had just spoken. "Yes, alone," she replied evenly. "Not afraid?" Adrian raised an eyebrow, as if testing her reaction. "What's scarier, living alone or living with people who aren't worthy of your presence?" Zara retorted, her words sharp and unfiltered. Adrian stiffened, surprised by her reply. No one had ever spoken to him like that, direct and without an ounce of reverence. "You don't know who I am, do you?" Adrian asked, a smirk tugging at his lips. He was accustomed to people recognizing his name and reputation, but Zara was different. "I don't need to know," Zara replied immediately, ignoring the hint of arrogance in his expression. "Your fame or wealth means nothing here. In this desert, you're just a lost man in need of help." Adrian felt as though he'd been dealt an unexpected blow. For the first time in years, he felt small and uncertain. Yet at the same time, her response only made him more determined to understand the woman before him. Their conversation didn't end there. Zara brought Adrian a cup of hot tea, and they sat across from each other by the fire. The flickering flames danced across their faces, warming the space while adding a subtle tension to the air. "Why would someone like you choose to live here, in the middle of the desert? Don't you feel lonely?" Adrian asked, his tone softening slightly, carrying a genuine curiosity. Zara chuckled faintly, her gaze drifting to the fire. "What is loneliness? Sometimes I think being surrounded by people who don't understand you is the real loneliness. Out here, I'm free. The desert doesn't judge, nor does it demand anything." Adrian fell silent. He couldn't deny that Zara's words touched something deep within him, a part of himself he had long buried. As a powerful CEO, he was constantly surrounded by people eager to win his favor, yet none of them truly understood him. The loneliness Zara described was something he knew all too well. "And what about you, Adrian Cole?" Zara asked, her voice calm but laced with depth. "A man like you, who has everything in his hands. Why are you in the middle of a sandstorm?" Adrian looked at her, momentarily at a loss for words. "Work," he answered curtly. "I came here for an important meeting." "Work so important that you're willing to risk your life for it?" Zara raised an eyebrow, her tone edged with subtle mockery. Adrian chuckled dryly. "In my world, if you don't keep running, you get left behind. I don't have a choice." Zara was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. "Perhaps the problem isn't the world you live in, but the way you choose to live in it." After a while, Zara noticed Adrian moving with difficulty. She focused on a scratch on his arm, the dried blood leaving a reddish stain on his crisp white shirt. "You're injured," she said, her voice filled with a sense of responsibility. "Let me take a look." Adrian hesitated briefly, but eventually allowed Zara to examine him. She brought out a simple first aid kit and carefully cleaned and bandaged his wound. Adrian watched her work, a storm of emotions swirling inside him. He wasn't used to accepting help, but Zara's gentle care brought him an unfamiliar sense of reassurance. "You're really good at this," Adrian said, breaking the silence. "You're like a doctor." Zara chuckled softly. Not quite, but I've learned to take care of myself. In the desert, if you don't know the basics, you won't survive for long. You're stronger than I thought, Adrian admitted. Zara lifted her head to meet his gaze, her eyes glinting with a curious light. Because I have to be. Everyone has to find their own way to survive. As night fell, the desert sky unfolded a magical scene. Thousands of stars shimmered against the velvet black sky, creating an extraordinary sense of peace. Zara led Adrian outside, where the tranquility of the desert could be felt more acutely. It's so different here, Adrian sighed, for the first time letting go of the tension within him. More peaceful than anywhere I've ever been. Zara smiled. The desert has its own way of making people reflect on themselves. They sat together on a rug spread over the sand, the space between them feeling smaller with each passing moment. Adrian opened up about his hectic life, the pressures, the monumental decisions he had to make every day, and even the losses he had always kept hidden. Zara listened without judgment, simply being there as a companion in the quiet night. In return, Zara shared her own story, about losing her family after an economic collapse and the years she spent learning to fend for herself in the harsh desert. Her story made Adrian realize that beneath her tough exterior was a heart that had endured immense pain. Amidst the stillness of the desert, in the glow of the starry sky, an unspoken bond began to form between them. Neither of them voiced it, but both Adrian and Zara could feel it, something deeply natural, deeply human. When Adrian returned to the small house, he couldn't stop thinking about the enigmatic woman who had made him forget his usual calculations, even if just for a moment. Zara, with her strength and depth, had not only saved him from the storm but also awakened a part of him he thought he had lost. That night, in the vast desert expanse, two lost souls found each other in the fleeting yet profound moment of destiny. The bright sunlight streamed through the small gaps in the windows, illuminating the modest interior of the house. Adrian woke up, feeling the stillness around him. Yet there was a lingering unease in his heart, a sense that the woman who had saved him, Zara al-Hayek, was no mere stranger living in the desert. Zara had left the house early, leaving Adrian alone. While waiting for her return, he decided to take a closer look around the small home. The simple yet refined furnishings reflected the meticulous nature of its owner. But what caught his attention the most was a loosely locked drawer near the bookshelf. Curiosity got the better of him, and Adrian pulled it open. Inside, he found an old photograph and a yellowed stack of documents. In the photo, a young and radiant Zara stood beside her parents, a commanding man and a gentle woman. At the bottom of the photograph, a caption read, "The Al-Hayek Family, 2014. Adrian immediately recognized the name Al-Hayek. It was one of the largest conglomerates in the Middle East, often mentioned in business reports as a symbol of success. But a few years ago, the name had vanished after a catastrophic bankruptcy. The accompanying documents contained financial records and newspaper clippings detailing the downfall of the Al-Hayek Group. One headline stood out, "Economic Disaster. Al-Hayek Group acquired by a multinational tech corporation." Adrian frowned as he read on. The records revealed that the Al-Hayek Group had been taken over in a hostile acquisition by a foreign corporation. The family lost all their assets, leading to the collapse of thousands of jobs in the region. Adrian felt a growing sense of familiarity with the details, as though he had seen them before in Coltech's internal reports. When Zara returned, Adrian was sitting silently, the stack of documents in his hands. As she stepped inside, her eyes immediately landed on the open drawer. "What are you doing?" Zara asked, her voice sharp, clearly displeased to see Adrian going through her belongings. Adrian stood up, holding up the photograph. "Zara, who are you really? And why is your family connected to the Al-Hayek Group?" Zara froze for a moment, her eyes betraying a flicker of unease before hardening into resolve. She stepped forward, took the photograph from him, and sighed deeply. "If you found this, I won't hide it anymore," she said, her voice dropping, each word feeling like a cut to her soul. "My father, Tariq Al-Hayek, was the founder and head of the Al-Hayek Group, one of the largest conglomerates in the region, but it all fell apart. In just one night, my family's company was taken over in a hostile acquisition by a multinational corporation. They took everything. the assets, the shares, even our dignity. Adrian stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. To my father, the company wasn't just wealth, it was his lifeblood. Losing it meant losing everything he had built his life around. He died just months after that, leaving my mother and me behind. But my mother couldn't bear the pressure either. She left me, and I had to fend for myself amidst the ruins. I moved here to get as far away as possible from the world that destroyed my family. Zara looked directly into Adrian's eyes, her gaze piercing through him. I don't need to know who you are, but I've sworn never to trust those who stand on money and power to trample over others. Adrian felt a wave of unease washing over him as he listened to Zara's story. He began to comb through his memory, recalling the major acquisitions his company had made. One name surfaced in his mind: Al Hayek Group. Taking a deep breath, Adrian spoke, his voice hoarse. Zara, do you know which company acquired Al Hayek? Zara narrowed her eyes, studying him carefully. A large tech corporation from the US. But why are you asking? Adrian stood frozen. Zara, I think that company was Coltech. My company. The air in the room grew tense, taut like a string about to snap. Zara's eyes widened, a mix of shock and anger flashing in her gaze. What did you just say? Her voice trembled. Zara, I didn't know about this, Adrian quickly tried to explain. I wasn't directly involved in the acquisition. It was part of a market expansion strategy, and I left the handling to my team. Zara let out a bitter laugh. Didn't know? Do you think saying I didn't know erases your guilt? Do you have any idea that your company's decisions destroyed an entire family, an entire community? My father is dead, my mother left me, and I've been exiled here, all because people like you wanted to make more profit. Adrian lowered his head, unable to respond. Zara's accusations struck him like sharp blades to his soul. He couldn't deny that he was part of the system that had caused her pain, even if he hadn't made the decision himself. Zara, I'm sorry, he said, his voice heavy with remorse. If I had known what happened, I wouldn't have let it happen. I want to do something to make it right. Make it right, Zara scoffed, her tone icy. Do you think your apology can change anything? You can't bring back my father. You can't undo the losses you've caused. Zara turned and left the house in anger. Adrian stood motionless, feeling trapped in an emotional storm with no escape. For the first time in his life, he realized that the power and responsibility his position brought were not just privileges, but also a heavy burden. He couldn't ignore this truth, nor could he turn a blind eye to Zara's pain. But how could he make amends to someone who had lost everything because of the decisions made by his corporation? Adrian knew that to regain Zara's trust, he needed to do far more than just apologize. But could the fact that he represented everything she despised ever be reconciled? Or would the desert remain a chasm between two people from completely different worlds? Adrian stood silently in the small house, his gaze fixed on the door Zara had just walked out of. Her cold words and fiery eyes lingered in his mind. For the first time in his life, he felt the wealth and power he possessed shrink into something insignificant and meaningless. Zara, the strong and resilient woman, had forced him to face a harsh reality. The decisions he had unknowingly approved had caused far more serious consequences than he had ever imagined. Adrian sat down on the chair, picking up the family photo of Zara on the table. In the picture, Zara smiled brightly, standing beside her parents, a happy family full of hope and dreams. This was a completely different Zara from the enigmatic and strong woman he had met in the desert. She was once a naive girl who had the whole world in her hands before it was all taken away. He wondered how he, a CEO so proud of building his company on transparency and responsibility, could have let this happen. The acquisition of Al Hayek Group, which he had heard mentioned, was just one of hundreds of major deals his company carried out each year. But now he realized that behind the numbers in the reports were real people, lives destroyed by decisions that had seemed like mere paperwork. How could I not have known? Adrian muttered, blaming himself. He felt guilty but couldn't deny the fact that he hadn't paid enough attention to the consequences of his team's actions. Later that evening, Zara returned, carrying a small bundle of firewood to keep the hearth going. She walked straight into the house, deliberately ignoring Adrian's presence, but he wouldn't let her. "Zara, wait!" Adrian called out, his voice filled with remorse. "I need to talk to you." Zara stopped, her eyes cold as she turned to look at him. "Speak, but I doubt there's anything you can say that will change my mind." Adrian stepped closer, his eyes full of sincerity. "I truly didn't know this had happened. When I approved the acquisition, all I received were reports describing it as a major business opportunity. No one told me about the consequences it had for your family." Zara laughed bitterly, the sound cutting through the silence like a blade. "You think not knowing absolves you of guilt? Adrian, you're the CEO. You're responsible for everything that happens under your authority. You can't simply blame your subordinates." "You're right," Adrian admitted, his voice heavy. "I can't undo what happened, but I can do something to make amends." Zara shook her head, her eyes filled with exhaustion and disappointment. "Adrian, you may be able to make amends to me, but what about my father? What about the other families who lost everything because of your decisions? You can't bring them back. Don't tell me you want to fix things because nothing can fix what's already happened." Her words hit Adrian like a hammer, each one a sharp reminder of the weight of his actions. He stood there, struggling with the enormity of the pain and loss he now realized he had contributed to. Yet despite Zara's rejection, a seed of determination began to grow within him, a resolve to prove that actions could speak louder than words, even in the face of the seemingly irreparable. Zara stepped to the fireplace, adding more wood to the flames, avoiding Adrian's gaze as much as she could. But in the end, she could no longer suppress the emotions welling up inside her. "Do you know what I've lost?" she said, her voice trembling but filled with determination. "My father was everything to me. He taught me how to be strong, how to face life's challenges. When he died, it felt like my entire world collapsed." She turned to face Adrian, tears shimmering in her deep, expressive eyes. "You've never felt that, have you? You've never known what it's like to lose everything that matters most to you because of someone else's greed." Adrian stood frozen. Zara was right. He had never experienced loss like hers. While his work brought him stress and countless challenges, he had always had everything within his grasp: power, wealth, and respect. Yet standing before Zara, he felt like a failure. "Zara, I can't claim to fully understand your pain," Adrian said sincerely, his voice soft. "But I can tell you that I admire you. Despite losing everything, you've stayed strong, surviving in a place as harsh as this. You've made me realize that all the things I have, money, power, mean nothing if I don't use them the right way." Zara's fiery anger seemed to fade slightly as she looked at him. "If you truly feel that way, prove it with actions, not words." Adrian nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "I will, Zara. Not just for you, but for everyone who's suffered because of my company. I promise." That night, the two sat by the fire, no longer exchanging accusations or arguments. Zara shared more about her family, about the happy memories with her parents before everything fell apart. Adrian listened attentively, feeling her pain deeply with every word she spoke. As Zara gazed up at the star-filled sky through the window, she said softly, "The desert is the only place where I can find peace. It doesn't judge, doesn't demand anything. It's just me and nature." Adrian nodded, for the first time truly understanding the stillness of the desert that Zara cherished. "You may find peace here, but you deserve a better life, Zara. A life where you don't have to run from your past." Zara didn't reply, remaining silent. But in her eyes, Adrian glimpsed a faint glimmer of hope. Fragile, yet still present. And in that moment, he silently vowed to himself that he would do everything in his power to nurture and protect that hope, to make amends for everything she had lost. The blazing sun illuminated the vast desert as Adrian left Zara's small house to return to the city. His heart felt heavy, not only because of Zara's anger and disappointment, but because he had come to the painful realization that he had unwittingly contributed to her suffering and that of countless others. He understood that mere apologies would never suffice. Only actions could make a difference. Adrian resolved that he would not let his promise fade into the desert winds. It was time to act, to make things right, no matter the cost. Returning to the top-floor office of Coltech's headquarters, Adrian no longer looked at it with the same pride as before. The gleaming glass walls and modern interior now felt foreign to him. This corporation, his brainchild, had been built on decisions he hadn't fully understood. He immediately convened a meeting with the senior leadership team. Adrian demanded a thorough review of all files related to the Al Hayek Group acquisition and similar projects. Over the next few days, dark secrets he had never been aware of began to emerge. Reports from the internal audit team revealed that the Middle East branch had used unethical methods to achieve their objectives. They had deliberately exerted financial pressure on Al Hayek Group, exploiting their vulnerabilities during an economic downturn to acquire the company at a bargain price. Worse still, after gaining control, the branch laid off thousands of employees without offering any compensation, leading to the collapse of entire communities. Adrian was furious, not just with those who had orchestrated the events, but also with himself. He had placed too much trust in his team, too preoccupied with growth targets to see the damage they were causing in his name. The next day, Adrian made a bold decision. He dismissed everyone responsible for the Al Hayek acquisition, including senior executives from the Middle East branch. Furthermore, he committed to establishing a new ethics oversight committee to ensure that all of Coltech's business operations would prioritize people and communities above profit. In a company-wide address, Adrian candidly admitted the corporation's mistakes. "We have made grave errors by prioritizing profit over people," he said, his voice steady but resolute. "From this day forward, Coltech will not just be a tech company. We will become a symbol of responsibility, humanity, and fairness. And I pledge that every decision from now on will align with that mission." Despite starting this journey to reform the company, Adrian's mind remained preoccupied with one person. Zara, the woman with her strength and frankness, had forced him to confront the truth and change himself. But as he thought about the way he had left, with an apology she had refused to accept, Adrian knew there was one responsibility he had yet to fulfill. He returned to the desert, hoping to see Zara one more time. After days of traveling, his off-road vehicle finally reached the small house where they had first met. But when he entered, the house was empty. Zara had gone. Adrian looked around, feeling the emptiness of the space. The handcrafted rugs, the old books, and the gentle glow of the hearth were all gone. Zara had taken everything with her, as if she had never been there at all. Adrian stood in silence for a long time, his heart heavy. But then he realized that even though Zara was no longer there, he could still do something to prove his remorse. He sat at the old wooden table and wrote a letter. "Zara, I know you may never forgive me, but I want you to know that you have changed my life. You've helped me see the things I once willfully ignored. I've begun to correct the mistakes I've made. I've dismissed those responsible for the Al Hayek acquisition and committed to supporting the communities impacted by our actions. This isn't just for you. It's for everyone who has suffered the way you have. But without you, I would have never realized this. I hope that one day when I've done something truly worthy, you'll see that your sacrifice wasn't in vain. If you ever need me, no matter where, I'll always be here. Adrian. Adrian left the letter on the table and walked out of the house. Before leaving, he reached out to non-governmental organizations in the region, pledging funding for reconstruction projects in the communities affected by Coltech. He began establishing scholarships and economic support programs to help people like Zara, those who had been abandoned in the relentless pursuit of profit. As Adrian's vehicle pulled away from the small house, he glanced back through the rearview mirror, feeling as though he had left a piece of himself behind. Yet he also carried a newfound sense of hope. Hope that his efforts would not only transform his company, but also provide opportunities for those whose lives had been shattered by past mistakes. Though Zara was no longer there, Adrian knew his journey had only just begun, and he resolved to keep going, not just to atone for his errors, but to build a better future, one that Zara and others like her could one day be proud of. Are you still following the story? Let us know your thoughts about it. Your feedback means the world to us. The sun dipped closer to the horizon, casting a warm amber hue over the desert. A gentle breeze swept across the dunes, carrying the unique stillness of the vast expanse. Zara returned to her small house after weeks spent supporting a distant community. With a bag of supplies slung over her shoulder, she entered her home, feeling the familiar comfort of the space, but unaware of the profound change awaiting her. As she placed the bag on the table, her eyes landed on a neatly folded piece of paper resting on the wooden surface. It was the only thing out of place in the house she had left vacant for so long. On the outside of the envelope was handwriting she recognized immediately. Zara. She opened the letter, and as she read the first few lines, her heart seemed to pause. Zara read each word slowly, as though afraid she might miss something if she rushed. Adrian's words carried a weight of regret, gratitude, and sincerity she hadn't encountered before. She placed the letter down, her gaze lingering on the final line. I hope that one day when I've done something truly worthy, you'll see that your sacrifice wasn't in vain. Zara exhaled deeply. The anger she had held on to for so long now softened. In Adrian's words, she no longer saw a wealthy man trying to justify himself, but a person genuinely striving to make amends for his wrongs. Not long after, Zara ran into an old acquaintance from the international aid organization she had once worked with. As they talked, her acquaintance brought up Coltech, a name Zara thought she would never want to hear again. Did you know, Zara? Their CEO, Adrian Cole, has done something remarkable. They recently funded a large-scale resettlement program in the Middle East. He didn't just send money, he personally visited the affected areas and met with families. He's genuinely trying to right the wrongs of his company's past. Zara froze, disbelief flickering in her eyes. Adrian went there himself? She asked, her voice tinged with surprise. Yes, the acquaintance nodded. He seems truly committed to changing the way his company operates. Zara, he's not just making empty promises. He's actually doing good work. Those words felt like the final push Zara needed. She could no longer ignore the stirrings in her heart. She knew it was time to confront the emotions she had left unresolved. The stage was set for Zara's next step, one that would finally allow her to face Adrian and the weight of their shared history. Would she be able to reconcile the man he was with, the man he was becoming? Only time and courage would tell. 6 months later, the light of Adrian's transformation had reached even the most remote corners, including the place where Zara lived. She heard his name mentioned in a speech shared by a local charity. From the image of a cold and distant CEO, Adrian now appeared as a man driven by sincerity and a newfound mission, to use his power to bring good into the world. One day, Zara received an invitation to a major charity event hosted by an international organization in London. Upon seeing Adrian's name listed as the keynote speaker, she knew she had to attend. The event was held in a grand theater, with hundreds of guests from around the world in attendance. Zara sat quietly in one of the back rows, observing as Adrian stepped onto the stage. He was no longer the arrogant, detached man she had first met. Adrian now spoke with sincerity, his voice resonating with genuine emotion. We often think success is measured by numbers, Adrian said, but the truth is, it's measured by the hearts we touch. I have made mistakes, but I've come to realize that it's never too late to change and to make amends. Zara felt the honesty in every word. As he stepped off the stage, she made her way toward him, her heart beating faster with every step. Adrian froze when he saw her, his eyes widening in surprise. Zara? Hello, Adrian, she said with a gentle smile, her voice soft yet full of meaning. I see you're doing wonderful things. Adrian smiled back, a kind of smile she had never seen from him before, one of relief and genuine happiness. Thank you for coming. I always hoped that one day you would see what I've been trying to do. Zara nodded. I see your change, Adrian, and I believe you're truly sincere. After the event, Adrian invited Zara to join him in his charitable projects. At first she hesitated, but eventually she agreed, wanting to see for herself if he truly was the man he appeared to be. They started with small projects, building schools, organizing food donation drives, and providing financial aid to communities affected by past corporate actions. Gradually, Zara realized that Adrian wasn't just changing himself, but also transforming the way he viewed power and responsibility. During each trip, Adrian took the time to listen to the stories of people whose lives he had inadvertently impacted. Those moments of vulnerability and connection allowed Zara to see the sincerity in him. She witnessed his relentless efforts to make things right, and slowly the wounds she carried began to heal. As for Adrian, He increasingly recognized that Zara was the person who had inspired his transformation, not only through her powerful words, but through the way she lived, resilient, compassionate, and always thinking of others. Together, they began to forge a new path, one built not on guilt, but on hope, understanding, and the shared desire to bring meaning to their lives and to those they touched. On a trip to a small village in the Middle East, once the heart of the Al-Hayek Empire, Adrian and Zara hosted a ceremony to inaugurate a new school. The school, built with funds from Adrian's foundation, was named Tariq Al-Hayek to honor Zara's late father. As the ceremony concluded, the brilliant hues of the desert sunset painted the horizon. Standing beneath the golden sky, Adrian gently took Zara's hand. "Zara," he said, his voice warm and sincere, "you've taught me the true meaning of strength and love. You've shown me that power only has value when it's used to help others. I can't change the past, but I want to build the future with you." Adrian knelt down, producing a simple yet elegant ring. "Zara, will you give me the chance to love and protect you, to build a meaningful life with you each day?" Zara looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears of happiness. "Adrian, I can't promise that everything will be easy, but I'm ready to take this journey with you." Adrian smiled, a sense of relief and joy flooding over him. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and beneath the vast desert sky, they embraced for the first time as two people ready to step into the future together. After that day, Zara and Adrian became not just partners in their charitable endeavors, but also companions in life. Together, they expanded their programs, reaching more communities and inspiring others with their story. Their love became more than a personal connection. It became a symbol of redemption, forgiveness, and humanity. Under the light of the changes they brought, Adrian and Zara proved that no one is beyond transformation, as long as they have the courage to face their mistakes and begin again. Thank you for following our story. Did this story touch your heart? Leave a comment below. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel.